Dear friends, welcome to the Eastern Front channel. Today we will dive into the memories of the killed Lieutenant Gerhard Link. This is the sixth part of his diary, which was captured on the battlefield. Links for the other part will be at the end of this video. In this video I will show on the Google map the advance and retreat of the German army, in accordance with the diary of the murdered lieutenant. We will trace his path, near Moscow, to his last destination, where he found eternal rest. In his diary, he willingly shared his thoughts about why there was such a difficult situation near Moscow. Perhaps it is the memories of Lieutenant Link that will shed light on the reasons for the defeat of the Germans near Moscow in the winter of 1941. Well, let's get down to Lieutenant Link's diary. January 22, 1942. With horror, I drive through Klishchevka, which was once drowning in mud, and get to the highway. There are a lot of abandoned trucks parked here. They have been standing along the road for several weeks now. No one even bothered to remove this property or set it in motion again. On one car I found a satchel and a carbine. This driver should be hanged. In many places, roadside poles have already been blown up and large unusable houses have been burned. Villages that were under heavy shelling. It's a pity, there are 8 to 10 houses left in them. It's hard for me to write everything I've seen. At night, the battalions, frozen through, came up. The platoon's dray horses are completely exhausted due to poor roads and lack of forage. We are in Katarinki. The few roads cleared of snow have to be bypassed. A messenger arrives at 4 o'clock. He brings the news that the battalion has not yet arrived at its intended location. With such a cold, he has been on the road for 12 hours. I'm going there right away. It's a good 10 kilometers on foot. The road is bad, full of potholes. I stumble a few times in the dark. I pass the place where the position should be. Wire fences and freshly cut trees give a sense of security. The terrible cold penetrates everywhere. The breath immediately settles in the form of frost on the balaclava, collar, and hat. The pocket flashlight refuses to burn. When I come to Sorokino after many hours of travel, it is already light and everything, of course, has been in order for a long time. Nothing is going well with us at all today. Motor transport is not moving forward fast enough. I arrive in the village at the same time as the units. After walking for some time, almost the whole village is occupied by foreign parts. We don't find a suitable room. January 24, 1942 -35 degrees Celsius. Again an urgent order on the construction of positions, and their improvement. The phone rings incessantly, endless conversations are conducted, important and unimportant things are discussed, orders are planned and written. The house looks like a dovecot. January 28, 1942. During the night, the 10th Company repulsed several strong enemy counterattacks. The reports arriving in the morning are unclear, incomprehensible. That's why I'm going to the front line. Dark bodies loom in the snow in front of the dugouts. These are the dead. Only I counted 10. There are still similar spots moving around in some places. At a distance of less than 100 meters, a blood-soaked head rises from the snow and falls powerlessly into the snow. I am able to see with a simple eye an unashamed enemy. I see his sentry guards changing posts. I'm sending some bees to the other side. Young Lieutenant Heaney was killed last night while knocking the retreating enemy out of the spruce forest. On the right flank, the Bolsheviks tried to arrange piggery, but they were repulsed with heavy losses. The dead remained on the battlefield. At noon they were no longer visible. The winds swept everything, destroyed the traces of the night battle. January 29, 1942 -15 degrees Celsius. Sweeps as before. All roads and paths are swept. Where there are snowdrifts, there is no passage. People get stuck, horses get stuck up to their bellies. January 30, 1942 -19 degrees Celsius. We are taking a new position. New dugouts should be built, communication should be established. In the snow and dense bushes, approach paths and roads are laid for the delivery of food. At night, brave sappers built wire barriers. On January 30th, the Führer spoke. His words awakened our confidence in the future summer. Most of all, we were touched by the statements against the erroneous opinion that is widespread at home, that it is possible to fight in winter as easily as in summer. The Führer left no doubt that everyone on the Eastern Front is strained to the extreme and that the hardships are monstrous. We are supported by the belief in our superiority and ultimate victory. We noted this state with satisfaction. The beginning of spring is not so far away now. And in the summer the offensive will continue. The task of the motherland is to forge weapons for us tirelessly. Until then, we must hold on under all circumstances. January 31, 1942. Although the situation in general can be corrected, we do not have particularly rosy prospects. After the Führer's inspiring speech, we received a cooling shower. While the enemy is surrounded near Rzhev, his mounted detachments managed to break through and break further to the highway west of Vyazma. A group of paratroopers was parachuted to help these cavalrymen. The highway and the railway are cut by these enemy detachments. We have to give up one rifle company. It goes on foot to help straighten the situation there. In the south, the breakthrough at Varia has not yet been completely eliminated. One regiment managed to advance quite close to the road along which we were bringing supplies. For this reason alone, we are forced to release our forces and remove people from our already weakly protected positions. There is no need to think about changing now, since there are no people. The regiment now has no reserves for the necessary counterattack. Due to traffic violations on the motorway and railway, the delivery stopped for several days. We don't have enough ammunition for artillery and we have to save. The tank compound, somehow cobbled together from parts of several divisions, is equipped with a minimum amount of fuel with the help of the U-52. Tanks are moving forward to attack the Russians from the rear. It is extremely sad that in this way it was necessary to weaken the divisions already put into battle. February 1, 1942. A blizzard has been raging for several days. Gigantic snow clouds are rushing over the earth. Everywhere there are huge snowdrifts. It is impossible to drive by car or ski. The road can be found only by the hangars. People and horses are stuck in the snow up to their necks. One of our companies, which is on the way, traveled the distance from Black Mud to Vorobyovo in more than 12 hours and came to Gzatsk only the next day in the evening at 20 o'clock, tired and exhausted to the extreme. February 2, 1942. Depressing news. Until now, we have always managed to deliver the baggage train in a timely manner and put it in a safe place. It's all the sadder that this time they didn't look after things. During one false alarm, a soldier pushed a tank of gasoline to the stove. In an instant, flames engulfed the entire house. The things stacked in it became the prey of fire. The size of the loss is still unknown for sure. I'm afraid that my officer's suitcase burned down along with everything. I only have what I was wearing left, a uniform, a raincoat, and many other things are no longer available at all. Things that are dear as a memory have also disappeared. February 3, 1942. During a business trip, I had to drive through a wonderful area. Small shaggy horses are rushing nimbly, the sled is flying on a shiny snow cover. February 4, 1942. It's a wonderful sunny day again. I can't sit in the room, I want to go outside. The beautiful flying weather also lured Soviet rats. They look like bees that flew out with the first spring ray in search of flowers. In small groups of 5 to 6 pieces, they sweep across the sky. While I'm still standing on the edge of the village and watching a Soviet fighter dive and pour machine gun fire on the streets, 100 meters away from me there is a crack. It repeats once, twice, 3 times. At first it seems to me that this is artillery, but quite unexpectedly a single-seat fighter sweeps overhead. In these places we have found for our horses the pitiful remains of dry fodder. But even this paltry supply is already running out. It is not necessary to count on transportation from the homeland under any circumstances. The portion of oats is terribly small. Horses that should be getting 10 pounds of oats a day get barely 2 pounds. The work remains as hard as ever. We are already opening sheds and stables and feeding the horses with straw from the roofs. A lot of horses are falling. The unfortunate animals are standing in the stable, sniffing the floor and eating their manure. The time is not far off when the last horse will die of hunger and weakness. I hesitate to think about the consequences. In this area, the subsurface waters are very close to the surface. In some dugouts, the dampness breaks right out from under the floor. According to the stories of residents, this area is swamped and becomes completely impassable for a while. The forest on the edge of which our positions are located is covered with water. Communication is possible only by boat. Our dugouts and shelters should then float. Yes, the prospect for the future is not brilliant. For these reasons, we put some of the ammunition in warehouses so that when there is no supply, we will not be left without anything. We did the same with food. We already know this period of impassable mud from last autumn, which is still fresh in our memories. Despite numerous misunderstandings and great difficulties with transportation, food has so far, except for the bad months last winter, always arrived, although often late. The bread ration was sometimes insufficient, especially for a soldier on the front line, who does not have the opportunity to add anything else to it. For the first time during this trip, we received chocolate along with a portion of tobacco. Chocolate gave us a lot of pleasure and brought a little variety to the usually monotonous field kitchen. The post office is a sore spot in a soldier's life. Very often it happens that the most necessary things are delayed. For the same reason, we still haven't received the much anticipated Christmas packages. And the letters go very slowly, although the last ones are relatively recent, dated mid-January. In the cities of Orsha and Smolensk, there are thousands of bags of mail at the train station. Since January 4th, the delivery of parcels has been discontinued. This explains the fact that some of the Christmas gifts that are already in Orsha have been returned back. This was not done particularly well, even from a psychological point of view, both for the front and for the motherland. February 5, 1942. I'm home alone today. The commander and Lieutenant Stabel left for the front line. I'm guarding the house, sitting at the table and writing. A concert is being broadcast on the radio. The sun is smiling and shining again, however, its rays are not yet bright, and it is too low to warm. Colonel Becher's newspaper, published by the 4th Tank Unit, has recently appeared, depicting the struggle at the gates of Moscow. Senior Lieutenant Gunther Kazin describes the breakthrough and the actions of the divisions participating in this breakthrough with breathtaking vividness. This is an exciting page of our glory. Each name can become a household name. The vivid presentation of the facts ends with the order of the General of the 2nd Artillery Corps, who speaks of the suspension of the advance from December 5, 1941 in connection with the coming winter. How much more need, suffering and deprivation will we have to endure? With what ferocity we fought in this harsh winter, unusual for us. I remember December 2, 1941. On this day, our regiment numbered 12 officers, 7 non-commissioned officers, and 362 soldiers. Despite the huge loss as a result of losses, frostbite and illness, the regiment bravely performed its duty and continued to fight. For some time our lieutenant colonel and I were the only representatives of the old command in the regiment. Then, with the return of some of the sick and slightly wounded, our situation improved a little. But we really lack replenishment, especially specialists, machine gunners, mortarmen, radio operators, gunners and loaders for infantry guns and anti-tank artillery, telephone operators and sappers. In addition, there is a noticeable lack of well-trained non-commissioned officers. Therefore, it is no longer possible for us to achieve the same impulse and combat capability. In any case, it takes a lot of time to carefully prepare the replenishment, which, unfortunately, has not been prepared in the right size to date. I think it is impossible for our unit to be thrown into new battles in such a state. Along with the lack of personnel, there are shortcomings in the most necessary military equipment and in the harness for wagons, as well as in trucks for bringing supplies. It's very hard to work with my commander. On the one hand, I have no right to do anything without his consent. On the other hand, he demands independence from me. Extremely irritable, he loses his temper over the most insignificant trifles. I take into account that we all have nerves strained to the extreme, but that's why we have to restrain ourselves. This situation is becoming unbearable. After all, an officer is something other than a clerk or a recruit. I recently ordered a few books for myself. I want to expand my small library. When circumstances allow, when there will be a slightly different situation than now, I will read more. I will deepen my knowledge after the war. I will undoubtedly continue my education. An officer is required to have comprehensive knowledge in all fields of science. A good education is already necessary from an educational point of view. The war, of course, makes us forget all these requirements. The more pressure we will need to work on spiritual development after the war. February 12, 1942. Nothing significant has happened in our sector of the front. The enemy, except for the disturbing fire and the raid of the reconnaissance squad, which was repulsed, left us alone. Last nights we went to the wire fences. The walk did not bring any special results. Our neighboring division on the right has been giving us a lot of worries for several days now. The soldiers did not repel the attack and did not hold their positions. The Russians have broken deep into the rear, very close to us, and are continuously pulling up forces. Now we are in trouble, too, because we had to give our neighbors our reserves and remove our people from the front line. Sapper companies were used as infantry for conservation. I don't think it can fix anything. It won't do anything. You can't endlessly patch up these holes in the defense. Artillery fire and bombers alone are not enough here. Even the strong actions of artillery are not able to do this, nor are the stormtroopers able to do it. February 17, 1942. The fight against the enemy who broke through in the neighboring division is being prepared for several days. A smokescreen, assault aircraft and tanks are used. But the enemy, strongly fortified, could not be destroyed. The unexpected appearance of the T-34 reduces success to nothing. Russians remain mobile even in deep snow. At high speeds, they go, pushing the snow away with high shafts, which are used by the enemy as shelters. The Reds turned the village of Vasilkovo into their stronghold. Despite all efforts, it has not yet been possible to take a narrow breakthrough strip in the pincers. The enemy throws up all new forces. The troops brought into battle have been in the open air for a whole week. Since attempts to cut off the enemy have still failed, my regiment and the reinforced 8th Motorized must be assembled and do this thing. This is piggish. The positions are just ready to some extent. On Sunday, at noon, the enemy sent us his Lenten greetings. The enemy could observe an increase in movement. Yesterday the fire was repeated at the same time. I was sent to a dugout that was still under construction. The mortar attack of the Russians this time forced our people to leave the kitchen. I opened the door of the dugout. Flames, rumble, dirt and smoke. The projectile pierced the roof and hit over the door, so it tore up the walls. The ceiling of the kitchen collapsed. The beds of the soldiers crumbled like a house of cards. One soldier was standing at the door. He was wounded. It's good that I got off with only this. The commander was in the next room at that time. I haven't been feeling well for a few days now, tormented by severe headaches. Shivers. I take quinine to support myself. In the evening, the fever stops. This concludes the diary of Lieutenant Gerhard Link of the 185th Infantry Regiment of the 87th Infantry Division of the Wehrmacht for the period from November 15, 1941 to February 17, 1942, who was killed near the unknown Smolensk village of Oshchepkovo. The diary of the murdered lieutenant was picked up by Soviet soldiers on the battlefield. It is worth noting that by the beginning of February 1942, the troops of the Western Front were engaged in offensive battles with the enemy in the Sychevsky, Skatsky and Vyazma directions. The Fifth Army, having liberated Mozhaysk and Uvarovka and advancing along the Minsk Highway, approached a powerful defensive line prepared in advance by the Germans, the so-called Vasilkovsky note of fascist resistance. The way to Gzatsk was blocked by our troops, at the cost of huge losses. The German defense in a narrow area